In Mildura, in Victoria's northwest, almond plantations are now in full blossom. Hundreds of beehives are being brought in to help with pollination. This is why Rob Costa has spent a small fortune trying to find out what's really in imported honey sold in every Australian supermarket.
Well, this is an orchard of about 150,000 almond trees. And of course, this time of the year it's particularly beautiful because it's full blossom. As a matter of fact, 2/3 of Australia's food relies upon bee pollination. So that's why, we're particularly conscious of the viability of the beekeeping industry in Australia, which is under great threat.
Rob is a member of the Costa family, which set up the country's biggest fruit and veg empire. The family's known for exposing the Calabrian mafia in Melbourne's fruit markets in the 1990s. And now Rob Costa is fighting a new battle. He's worried adulterated honey from China is finding its way into Australian products, and he says he has the evidence to prove it.
There's probably half a dozen different ways that you can dilute, cut, blend honey in order to cut cost.
Are you saying it's food fraud?
Absolutely.
Rob hired one of Australia's top law firms, King & Wood Mallisons, to buy 28 jars of Australian and imported honey from 5 supermarket chains around the country. They were then sent to a state-of-the-art lab in Germany to be tested. Why Germany?
Well, because we don't have that particular testing in this country.
Honey is hard to test, so it's easy to pass off as something else. This lab in Germany is one of the few places in the world that's equipped to find out what's in the honey you eat. It uses what's called nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, and it's increasingly being used internationally to test for food fraud. It tested 28 jars of honey from supermarkets around Australia and found 12 contained adulterated honey. 4 out of the 6 IGA's Black and Gold private label came back adulterated. 2 of the 6 Aldi Bramwell's private label brands failed the test, and 6 out of 8 of the Capilano's Lowry brand tested positive for adulterated honey. Australian honey passed. Capilano says it imports only from trusted suppliers and tests every batch for authenticity. There is no suggestion it or other companies were aware of the alleged adulteration.
If we compare it to pure honey, we see some peaks which show us that there are high organic acids, which is also an indication of adding syrups to the honey. Why is honey adulterated? Of course, it's a cost question. And if you want to have a product for a low price, you get a product which you think it's honey, but it's not honey. It's a growing problem because the people who adulterate using more and more sophisticated methods. So it's becoming more and more complicated to detect it. Most of the honey is with a blend of Chinese honey have been detected with the NMR as adulterated.
Honey isn't always honey. That's the shocking finding. Almost half the samples were not 100% pure honey, yet the labels state otherwise. Alarmingly, we don't know all the ingredients. But the results suggest that adulterated honey is in IGA and Aldi private brands, as well as Capilano's Lowry brand. When the samples went through the official Australian C4 sugar test, they passed. But that test is decades old and can't detect a range of substances such as rice syrup, which is used as a cheap bulking agent.
All of our Capilano branded products are 100% pure Australian honey, sourced right here from our network of over 600 beekeepers.
Capilano is the biggest honey company in Australia.
Yeah.
And as you were mentioning, the Lowry brand was tested and it came back as adulterated.
Yeah.
Were you shocked by those results?
No, I'm not shocked by the results at all. I mean, we know what's going on. We expected it, but we just needed the evidence. So yeah, I certainly wasn't shocked.
Beechworth, Victoria. Picture perfect, pristine. The Goldsworthy family has been making pure Australian honey here since 1880 and is now the second biggest honey maker in the country. They've never sourced imported honey, no matter how cheap, because they don't trust it.
Check what type of honey it is.
Yeah, if the flavour's right, you can usually taste it, what it is. The bees won't be very happy with me. Go down there, sweetheart.
I'm really saddened and really horrified by those results, but not surprised. Rico?
No, I reckon it's red box.
But I think the thing that actually makes us the saddest is the fact that the consumer is completely blind to this, and as more and more of this takes over the market globally, you know, there's a race to the bottom, and so in order to get it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, you know, more and more shortcuts get taken, and that's when, you know, who knows what ends up actually in the product.
Jodie Goldsworthy is passionate about honey. She spent her lifetime in the business. You only source Australian honey. Why is that?
Well, back in 2004, Australia ran into the first really dreadful drought, and we were going to run out of honey, literally. There were risks associated with imported honey. We looked at the options and we made a really simple decision. We had small children at the time, and we looked at each other and said, if we were to import this honey, we wouldn't eat it on our breakfast table. And so that for us meant that there was, you know, it was not a decision that we should take. It wasn't a decision that was right for us.
What can you put into honey to not be detected?
So potentially you could put rice syrups, beet syrups, corn syrups, wheat syrups, any cheap sweetener could be used to blend with honey. And Australia, I think, is quite vulnerable to food fraud because we are simply too trusting. We assume that the products coming into this country are okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Phil. Thank you for your time. I know it must be hectic for you in Dublin at the moment. So you've been in the bee industry for most of your life?
Correct. My dad and my granddad were beekeepers.
Phil McCabe is the president of the peak international body for the honey industry. He's working with Interpol. So tell me about your work with Interpol.
Interpol have identified that there is a huge honey fraud taking place in the world. I mean, what I mean by honey fraud is we estimate at the moment that somewhere between about 30, maybe anywhere between 30-35% of all honeys on the world market now are fake or fraud. You know, if they can produce them at a low cost and sell them at a high price, then the criminal gangs of this world get their hands on it. At the moment, 140,000 tonnes of honey is being exported from China each year. They do not have enough bees to produce that amount of honey. The biggest problem at all, I would say, is health, obesity in the sugars that are being produced in these syrups.
Will you be mentioning to Interpol some of these findings from the Australian testing?
Absolutely. The next meeting for the Interpol is in Lyon in France in sometime in October.
Honeybees are vital for our food supply. They pollinate 65% of Australian agriculture. Hot weather and dry conditions have seen local honey production falter, yet prices of honey are lower than ever. On this rooftop in Melbourne's CBD, beekeepers have set up hives to bolster bee numbers. In the past decade, a massive 25% of commercial beekeepers and hives have left the industry. Battling disease and drought is bad enough. Now they're being attacked by cheap imports. If nothing is done, consumers will continue to be duped, and it will devastate the industry and Australian agriculture. Should consumers be worried?
Consumers should always be worried about deceptive and misleading conduct, but particularly for food for food fraud, food adulteration, food security and safety.
Alan Fells is the former boss of the consumer watchdog, which regulates products and labels, including honey.
A lot of honey is blended with a majority of foreign-sourced honey, and that slips through without being detected. It should be.
How have we got to this position?
The companies get away because there's not enough checking at all stages of the supply chain. The ACCC should investigate immediately.
Just a little bit of Capilano honey does a whole lot of good.
The products are tested in accordance with Australian law and they pass. So brands might not be aware of the adulteration. Australia's biggest honey operator, Capilano, had the highest fail rate with their Alawi brand. It's made with 70% Chinese honey. Capilano's share price is going through the roof due to record profits and a $190 million takeover offer from a private equity consortium that wants to tap into the Chinese honey export market. Bega Cheese might also lodge a takeover bid. In July, Coles withdrew all Alawi products, saying it was part of a product range review. Capilano strongly denies any issues with its products and criticised the NMR test. It says it puts every batch of imported honey through 2 different tests and meets Australian standards. Capilano declined an interview request. In a statement, it says it stands by the quality and purity of all our honey brands, including Alawi, which it says has never failed more stringent and appropriate testing by world-renowned laboratories. It claims NMR is inconsistent. Australia's peak industry body, the Australian Honeybee Council, recently endorsed the NMR test. 730 has obtained leaked documents which show both Capilano's chairman and deputy chairman attended the honey industry's AGM in July, where a motion was passed recommending the NMR test. In an email to the government, it says the council wants it to begin using the best available method, NMR. We're told the vote was unanimous. Capilano wouldn't say how its chairman voted, and its deputy, who was there, can't remember. Beekeepers are worried about speaking, fearing it might tarnish the whole industry.
Even deciding to speak about this problem publicly is, I think, one of the most hard decisions that we've really ever made. The emotional impact, I suppose, of watching an industry on a knife edge, facing the threats that we are, it does take its toll. We know that we are not competing on a level playing field. You just really wonder where things will end.
Capilano says the same sample can show different readings from different labs. It also says NMR can't test foreign honey mixed or blended with Australian honey, something the German lab, QSI, vigorously denies. There's no suggestion that Capilano's self-named brand of honey is affected. You can read the responses from the supermarkets on the ABC website.